Welcome to the basing video for wood planks, treasure chests, and barrels. There's some other things that I'm going to try and cover. Some ropes and coils, ropes on masts, learning how to make these little coins, the locks on the chests, and it's all one relatively simple technique, and that's carving the baked Sculpey. And we have a painted example showing these same wood planks. Once they're painted, then you can really pick up that wood texture. So next, we're going to cover this Sculpey. To create these wood planks, we're going to use the thin, rolled out Sculpey. You can see how thin this is in comparison to some of the thicker sheets that I've used on the other bases. Generally, this is about the one and only thickness that I use. Got a few different widths. Thickness is the same. This rolled out a little bit wider in case I need to make a bigger base. But this is the basic unit that we're going to use to make the chests and the planks. There are also a few other Sculpey items that I've baked, and these are little pieces of Sculpey that I've just by hand formed into the basic shape of a chest. So these have no carving at all. This has some carving. Same thing with the chests, just a barrel, basic barrel shape here. You can see here that I've started to carve it down. One thing I haven't done yet are the barrel lines for the different planks inside it. I'm going to cover all that, but I just wanted to show that sometimes it's not just these flat sheets, but maybe we'll actually use a basic form, carve it from there. We can also add plastic card and polystyrene tubing like we've done here, and we're going to cover some of that next. Our next material is polystyrene tubing. It's available in all different shapes and sizes. Available in thin, really thin, flat pieces. This is also about the same type of flat, only it's a little bit thicker. I don't think it's really going to show up on camera, but this top one is the thinner and more flexible piece. This is a little bit thicker. And we've got some round polystyrene tubing here, a few different widths. So you can see this thinner would be good for rivets. The thicker, good for coins, that sort of thing. I have a few different widths of this. We got the bigger rod out here now, so it'll be a little bit easier, more distinct, this versus the thin that we're going to use for our rivets. You can see those rivets right here. So you can see we've used this polystyrene tubing here. Also, this little metal piece is just the end of a paper clip. Just a regular old paper clip like this. So about that size. Whatever size chest you need. Could go this way, go that way. And as you can see, our thick polystyrene tube, that's what we would use to fill in the treasure chest. You can even use thicker polystyrene tubing to make this mast. I have a few different sizes I like to use for that. See that I've roughed up the texture a little bit, made it a little bit more like wood, and not like smooth plastic card. Broken off the top, and some green stuff rope. So the next thing I want to talk about is green stuff, brown stuff, which is actually what we're going to use on our example bases here. Here we have a few other materials that we're going to use on our base. And I'm sure most everybody is familiar with green stuff. A mix of the blue and the yellow. Depending on how much of one or the other you mix, you can get something that's maybe more soft and pliable in the case if you use more of the yellow, or something that's a little bit stiffer and is actually going to set up a little bit faster if you use more of the blue. This is not quite as well known. This is called brown stuff. It's made by the same company. It's the same principle. This is basically the equivalent of, I think it's the yellow. This is the equivalent of the blue. Here I generally mix these 50-50. I really don't play around too much with the mixture. Brown stuff has the advantage of, as they say, holding an edge better. This is more stiff than the green stuff will ever be, which is good if you want an edge, or say you want your rope to be a little less flexible and a little more strong. But that strength does come with a little bit of a price. This stuff will be more brittle. This, the blue and green, it's always going to be a little more flexible. It'll bend and not break. This will snap. This might snap and break. So that's why I usually, if I'm going to use it, it's an area like this that's entirely supported, not something that's going to be off where it can just break. Green stuff a little bit easier to sculpt than this. And I'll cover a few of the tools that I like to use. These are pretty much the only two tools that I use for sculpting. I'm going to move this out of the way so you can see the two different edges. So this is just a flat, round. And let's get this a little closer so you can see that. And then this, did a little bit of a hook to it. Sort of a flat surface here. But this is what I like to use. Create the wood rope texture here. Flat surface tool. It's a little more convenient for creating things like this locking mechanism and for smoothing out any little gaps there might be. Again, this tool, you can see these little necklace gems here. That was sculpted with this tip. So now that we know about Sculpey and we know about our polystyrene tubing and our green stuff and brown stuff, we're going to start to make a few bases, and we'll begin with the essential wood planks. To carve our basic wood texture, there's really only 3 tools that I use for this. This is a wood carving tool with a bit of a hook on the end. Another wood carving tool that has this 90-degree angle. And the scribing tool has 2 different ends. Scribing tool is best for some of the finer grains that we want to carve. This, we're going to see, is for the basic channels that define each panel. And this is what we use for some of our heavier wood textures. So we have some of our pieces of Sculpey. Again, the thickness that comes right out of the clay extruder. Have a few bases here. And let's break off a piece. And if you want to, now this I just eyeballed, but if you would feel more comfortable drawing out where you want your panels to be, you can see I'm going to make different thicknesses here. I've already got 3 different thicknesses of planks, so there we go. Now I'm going to do this to mark where they end. And you can see each one is in a different place. You can change the length of these, but it's not quite like a brick pattern. You can see I've varied that pattern here. And that's why I usually, if I think it's going to be important, I will mark this out ahead of time. So we're going to use our 90-degree tool here to define these shapes. So just hold this down, put some pressure here, and we're going to push straight. And you can see what's come out. See, the pencil line is gone. First line, and do our second line. Gonna line this up, gonna push, and you'll see that little seam of Sculpey be removed. And trying to keep my fingers here so the tool moves away. Although this is not really a sharp tool, shouldn't do much to you if it does hit you, but always better to be safe. Here we go. Now I like to make these some a little more shallow, some a little more deep. That last one was a little more deep, this one's a little more shallow. So it's a little thicker here, a little thinner there. Now we've done all these rows. We're going to go the opposite direction. Again, we're going to find a spot. Move this a little more trickier because we want to stop. Same thing here. Next one. One more. So you can see now here, this end, because of the angle that I was holding the tool, not quite complete. So we're going to turn this around and complete that line. We want to be careful because if we pop over, it's not going to look so much like a plank anymore. So you can see we have all this ready. And now we can start to put in some of the wood grain. I'm going to draw this out with a pencil so you can see what it is that I'm after. So here we are. With some wood grain drawn out. And we want to have these go in different directions, and we want to have a different type of grain. You can see this is going to be a little bit thicker. So even just drawing this out, we're going to have a few different textures. This is going to be pretty thin, pretty tight grain. This one's going to have a knot right here. Work our way around that. Another larger knot over there. So sometimes drawing this out in advance As a reminder, vary the texture. It's like you see on this piece, with the knot, with grains that flow in all different directions. Because on your finished base, you can see that matters. So now that we've got this drawn out, take this tool, I'll show you here just how much pressure that it's going to take. So we're not going to apply quite as much pressure here as we did here, because we don't want this to be as deep as the lines that define the planks. So I'm going to start with this middle section. I'll work on this so hopefully you can see it. So I'm starting with the knot. And then I'm going to work my way around that. See, not quite as much Sculpey being removed. It's a little bit, but not quite as much. So here we go. And work on this. So texture went this way. Now it's working this way. So that's how you can use this tool. I'm going to try the scribing tool as we do some of the other planks. So I'm going to set up here. I'm going to make a knot in the center, dig out some of that, and then continue the texture lines around that. You can see that the scribe tool tends to hold its pattern a little better than this. Other benefit is that you can go like this, so instead of straight down, working at an angle, and you can see how that pulls out some of the Sculpey. This is really more of a straight up and down. This will give you a little bit of sideways action, so you can actually carve out a little more. Again, it's more what you want. I like to use them both on the same piece so that the texture varies from one plank to the next. So let's do this one here. It's got another knot. And you don't have to put a knot in every single plank. Carry the texture out. You can see these went tighter to more spread out. This is even more spread out. So I'm only going to put these 3 lines here. Now here I'm going to start off by held this at an angle, and you can see it pushes you more towards the grain of the Sculpey. Whereas going this, you can sort of fight against the grain of the Sculpey. But I wanted this to be more beveled. So I just have a few more pieces on this side to do. Again, trying to always switch up the texture. There's another long piece. As you can see here, there's a whole bunch of small little lines. Okay, finish that. once you've got your basic planks, maybe we want to refine this a little more or make an edge deeper. So this, I'm going to try and make some of my plank edges a little deeper. And hold this down and drag. Hold this down and drag. So what I'm doing now is just enhancing the divisions in my planks, because I wanted those to have a little more definition. And maybe some of these lines I want to have a little bit deeper. Maybe I want to have this knot show up a little more. And it depends what size base you have. Now if you've got a 40mm round, that will mostly cover that. But let's say we only have a 25mm. So a couple of things we can do. We can either break off uneven pieces like this. But again, the overhang with this type of Sculpey, not always the best idea, because you can see how easy that breaks away. So what we can do is glue this down. And again, this glue, Sculpey is very absorbent. So it's going to stick. You're not going to have a lot of time to move it around. Got a little dust brush here to get some of the excess Sculpey out of the center. So here we have this overhang. Maybe we want to get rid of some of this. There's a few ways to do that. You can actually cut it with the scissors. Like this. Be careful not to crack your Sculpey. See, I've cut most of that away. Once that's cut away, you can take an X-Acto knife, and you can see that I'm using the angle of the base to guide the knife. So see, we have a rough cut here. Final cut. Same thing here, we're going to move the knife along the edge of the base. So we have this nice flush edge. So we can finish this off. Quickly cut this away. And use the base as a guide, not putting much pressure here at all. Just enough to cut away some of the excess. So I'm not worried about hitting my thumb because there's hardly any pressure here. And now you can see we have a nice flush. It's not going to break. There's nothing overhanging. But there's still enough footprint even for this miniature. With even a few maybe little coins, some little extra. And again, this doesn't have to be only pirate theme. Well, what if this is a tavern floor? Well, then you could put a bottle there. You could put a cup, tankard, something. So there we have our first wood plank base. Now we're going to move on to using the same principle of the planks. try and make some chests. In this segment, we're going to learn how to apply the basic techniques of making planks to make these little chests. Again, same width of Sculpey, and this time we're going to cut it into pieces. I have a little bit of a straight edge that I've made for myself here, so I can draw out my pieces. So let's say we want to make this size chest. I want to make sure that these edges start out reasonably straight. So I'm going to measure these two pieces, the front and the back. It's going to be about this wide. And about this tall. You can see I'm always using one of these square edges to mark this off. Now there's a few ways that I can cut these pieces out. I can either use the X-Acto, score, and break, or I could even cut those with the scissors. Let's try the score and break method here. I'm actually going to use my little straight edge here. And I'm just going to cut with the X-Acto knife. And sometimes I cut completely through, and here I'm just going to score it and then break it. You can also use your scissors, cut away, and see I'm working my way towards it. I'm not going right to the edge and chop. And we're going to work slowly, little by little, towards that edge. A little more, and there we go. I guess I've used the scissors so often, I'm just a little more comfortable using that. But that really only works well for clearing away these little pieces. If you want to do this part, yeah, generally a better idea is take some kind of a straight edge and cut it with your X-Acto. Go. Same thing here, we can't work our way down. We want to cut this straight. Now here's a slightly sharper blade, a little nicer tip. Because here I'm going to want to cut almost all the way through. See, I'm doing this several times. I'm not trying to just go all the way through. I try to go all the way through. There's a chance I could shatter the piece. And I'm going to make sure this edge is somewhat even as I'm carving this away. Just like I was doing here to bevel this edge. Trying to make some of these edges a little less choppy. Again, not working very hard. Okay, so there's a couple of pieces for the front and back. Set those aside. Now we want to make this. What I'm going to do is clean up this edge a little bit first. this edge a little bit. This one. Look how wide we want these to be. Use the straight edge. I can use my scissors, work my way up to that line, little by little. And now use the knife, cut this edge. And this can be as wide as you want it to be, as narrow as you want it to be. I might even make it a little narrower than this. Scissors to cut that down. Make sure they're the same width. So we have 4 basic pieces. Make our walls. We'll also need a bottom piece here as well. 2 different ways. You can have it be inset, or you can have it sit on the bottom like this. I tend to go more with the inset, although that can be a little more difficult to cut and position. So first, with our pieces, we want to carve in our texture. And it's just like what we did with our wood planks. I'm going to move away some of the debris here. Now here, this is going to be more of a single plank. So I'm going to make a knot, draw around that. I'm only gonna carve the one side. Now if this could be open chest and you really want to see texture, you can carve both sides. That's one of the reasons why we're doing these as individual pieces. But to save a little bit of time, we're just going to do the one side. So I'm back to the bevel tool here. Let me scribe these lines. Now I want to be sure, I have to be careful here as I get towards the end of this. I don't want to snap off pieces of this plank. You can see I've just flipped this around because it's easier to work these tools, pulling them towards you. So I've got this piece with its texture. First piece is done. Let's go to the second piece and try a little different texture here. Not even going to draw it out this time. Just going to see what happens. Now watch, I'm going to make this be tighter here. See, I'm trying to loosen up here, tighten everything here. I'm going to turn this around and use this to create a little more of a bevel. Now, let's say we want to go a little bit deeper. You can use this. really carve out some deep lines, but we have to be careful to not pop off too much of the Sculpey on the ends. So here we go on our side panels, and we'll use this tool this time. Again, it's going to be more which ones are you comfortable with, what exactly the type of textures are that you're looking for. And one final piece. So there's going to be a knot there. Work our way around it. Now we're using this, making these little planks to make a chest. Well, this can also be a table. You can put 4 legs on the bottom of this and you have a table. It could be a chair texture. And now we have our 4 pieces. So what we're going to do is we're going to glue these in place. So there we go. What I'm going to do is as those glue together, I'm going to do the next set. And then we'll glue these 2 halves together. So as one dries, see I've got this next one. And you can see already it's set very quickly. So if you want to move this around, you're not going to have a lot of time to do that. It's going to set up reasonably fast. So next thing we want to do is put some glue on this edge and this edge. We're going to glue our 2 halves together. And I'm going to let this sit on the board. Hopefully you can see this. And you might glue your fingers together, so always be sure that that's not going to happen. Gluing your finger to the Sculpey is not so bad, but finger to finger is not going to be good. Gonna lose a little skin that way. So I need to get this a little bit of time for that Sculpey to settle. Now if you have an edge that's not quite perfect, couple things you can do. Carve it down with your knife. Or it can just be the bottom of the chest. Either way. So what we want to do is take our edge here, so one line is straight. What we're going to do is position the chest like so. And I'm going to use my pencil. And I know this piece should fit in there reasonably well. Score that and break it. Score that, break it. Use my scissors. And then we've got our piece to fit in here. If it doesn't fit, it's always better to be bigger and trim smaller. So what we can do is get our glue. And we'll just wait for that to settle a little bit. And we're going to look at these next bits that we need to do here. And that's where we're going to grab our polystyrene pieces. Now here's a few different thicknesses again. The thicker one, the thinner. I'm going to go with the thinner piece. Now this is going to be a little bit not as wide as here. That should be just fine. As long as, see, it's going to kind of cover that edge just a little bit. And that's fairly straightforward. All you have to do is position it. This. Mark it with a pencil. You have to cut it with the scissors. Cut it with your knife. And glue it down. Again, this is going to set pretty quickly, so you don't have a lot of time to fool around with it. So there we go. It's in its position there. Now we want to have a piece on this side as well. Let's say you want to do this instead. And that is glue it. And then take your scissors and cut it down. Either way is fine, but now we have an edge for this chest. Let's say we wanted to try something different. Now here, again, to hide this seam, put a piece essentially right there. Got this thicker rod, which can go here. And I'm going to do it on the other side to show a contrast between that. So let's measure this out. Cut it with our knife. We'll glue that in place. Hopefully you can see this. And if it sticks over, cut away the excess. Same thing. Mark this off. You can also use scissors. Cut that. Glue it down. Yes, my fingers are in the way, but here we go. So I'm going to complete our thinner material here so I can get a little bit better of an idea of these two different kinds. Let's cut that. And you don't have to do this at all if you don't want to, but I think it's going to be a little more realistic looking chest. I'm going to do this to finish off this last piece right here. Down. Cut the excess away. So now we have metal bracing out front and then around the corners. It's like we have these two different chests. Now we have our thin tubing, like these. It's a little bit thinner, a little bit thicker. I'm going to go with this type. Right here. And that's what we're going to use to make some rivets here, or nails, as the case may be. I'm going to use this so you can see what I'm going to do here with my knife. And we're going to shave away some pieces. See, there's our first little piece shaved away there, down at the bottom of the screen. And I think it's only going to take a few for each of our panels. These things will sometimes jump around and disappear. It's just kind of a fact of life when you're shaving away these tiny, tiny little pieces, but they have to be reasonably thin. Now what we have to do is apply these here. A couple different ways to do this. I'm going to use one of my scrap pieces of Sculpey to hold some glue. I'm going to snip myself a little bit of this plastic card. To use as a glue applicator. I have two little spots of glue. And I'm going to use the knife to position one of my pieces right here. Again, let's shave off some more of these. It's going to be easy to lose track of these. It's just, you'll have to shave probably twice as many as what you're going to actually need, because some are not going to come out the way you want. It's hard to get a consistent cut. So I have a few more. Pick it up off with the knife. The sharper it is, the easier. And we put it in place right here. And we use this. A few dots of glue. Back to the knife. Position that. And the better the point is on your knife, the easier it is to pick up these rivets. Just like we put here, that these are slightly smaller than these. I can do the same thing on this side too. So I'm going to back this up, shave off a few more pieces. And just like we did on this, I'm going to put a few spots of glue here. And grab some rivets. And place them right there. On the other side here, same thing. A few dots of glue. I have a few more rivets left. Now here I want to make sure that these are reasonably aligned with each other. Okay. So that gives us that effect. And either way, there's no necessarily right or wrong way to do this. It's just your preference. Now again, if I wasn't going to put anything in here, it's going to be open, I'd probably want to carve texture on this bottom piece. But maybe you're going to put some kind of treasure in there. And to make the treasure pieces, well, that's going to be the same principle of just shaving down a slightly thicker version of this. Now if you want to put a little mechanism for locking, there's a few different ways to do that, and we'll try and cover that in our next segment. For our next segment, we're going to look at these two different kinds of locking mechanisms. This one's a little bit easier to make. I'm going to start off with a slightly thicker piece of this polystyrene tubing, and I'm going to use that on this side. So I could go either way. I could go sideways, straight up and down. I'm going to work this sideways. I'm going to make a piece. It's about this wide. Cut that with a knife. Glue that in place. And we're going to use paperclip method here. So I have my cutters, and we have a paper clip. I'm going to use this thinner end of the paper clip right here. Gotta be careful with the eyes. Make sure I don't lose my piece. I'm going to cut down these edges here. And that's going to go here. That's going to be easier to position this and make it stay. I draw a pilot hole first. So what I want to do is see exactly where that should go. It's going to have to go about here. Have to be careful not to break our Sculpey. We're not applying much pressure at all. See, I've already gone through the plastic card. Now, there's a few ways we can do this. I can either try and measure this, or all I have to do is have one of these pieces of the clip be a little longer than the other, and the longer piece goes into that hole. So we're going to try that. So I'm going to make sure this hole is big enough. A little bit of glue, not too much. We don't want to have just glue all over the place. A little there. There. And I'm going to use this, little pliers, to hold on to the paper clip. So now we have paper clip held in place. Now if we want to try to make this kind of a lock, well, little green stuff. And as I mentioned, you can mix more of the yellow, more of the blue, depending on what you want to do. This one I'm going to actually mix more of the blue than the yellow. So you can see I have a little more blue than yellow. And I've got some water over here. Some people use oil to keep their tool from sticking to the green stuff or themselves. I just always use water. And then I'm mixing this together. And now it's just about ready to go. And I'm going to take a chunk of this, position it here. And if you remember, we have our two sculpting tools, the flat edge, and this. I'm going to use the flat. Smooth this out. Use this piece. I can go one of two ways. I can pull away some of this excess where it's round. You can see I just cut, pushed away. So every time I do this, I dip this tool into the water. Because otherwise, if I don't, it's just going to stick. You're going to see me alternate between these two tools. Again, to flatten out, make sure the edges are reasonably straight. So we have this. Now again, this is where green stuff is handy. If you have any gaps, you can fill your gaps. And now we're just about ready to make a little bit of a locking mechanism, a little bit of a keyhole. So we're going to stir it out, measure up how big we want it. The round section at top, and the rest of the keyhole. Now I'm rushing this here, so if you want to be a little bit slower with yours, that's fine. So basic keyhole, made this one a little bit bigger so it sort of matched the size of our paper clip. And the other thing you have to realize is you have to be a little bit patient, because once this is all painted with all these different colors of wood, some more green, some more yellow, some more brown, you won't have this crazy kaleidoscope of colors. We have black and silver, and now we have green. Eventually, when all this is painted and it all looks unified and has a miniature on it, this will be a distant memory. All those crazy colors. Now, another thing that I did was cut some of that thicker plastic rod into coin-sized pieces like this, so I can see what they look like piled in. So right away, this is a way we can cover the floor of this chest. without having to carve all the wood texture there. You can see even in these other chests, it's not all coins. So there we go, we have that chest. Now let's move on to a barrel. Our next piece that we want to make is a barrel. And in this case, this barrel was carved entirely from a block of Sculpey. Now here's just a basic Sculpey shape. Formed it, baked it, just like I would any of my Sculpey sheets. What we're going to do is we're going to carve some of this away. First thing I want to do is designate these two metal bands. I take my pencil and just roughly draw those out. You can make them thicker, thinner, depending on the quality of the barrel. They may not even be very straight. They may not even be the same width on the top and on the bottom. All this is to just show where they are. And we have top barrel line and the bottom. What we want to do is carve out the top. I'm going to introduce a new tool, which will be a little bit easier to make this inside circle right here. Basic wood carving tool, part of the same set as this. What it's going to let me do, as you can see, is carve away what I'm doing is carving this away. And I'm starting a little bit further away from the edge to begin, because I don't want to just pop off an entire piece. So by starting further away, now I can work a little bit closer with this tool. Hopefully you can see this. I know it's a little bit small, a little hard to see. And I'm going to dig out the rest of this. Clear away some of the debris. So we've carved out this area. With the scribe tool, we can do a few things. We can clean up this edge, and now we're going to carve a little bit of wood texture there. Take away the excess with the brush. So there we go. We have a little bit of wood panel texture already on our top. You don't really have to do this on the bottom because that's going to be glued to the base. Now what we want to do is these two bands that go around. See, I'm taking the X-Acto knife. I'm making somewhat of a pilot edge here. Not pressing down very hard again. Not even hard enough to go through the skin. But just hard enough to make a pilot edge right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to carve down to that edge. See, this is intact, and I've carved away a little bit here. Not much at all, just a little bit. And you can see, since I've made this little bit of a pilot edge here, when I carve down, it just pops away. See how that just comes away? If I hadn't done that, then I was probably just going to continue and slice all that away. So we have that side. Continue them almost all the way around. Now I have to do this side also. Just going to turn this around. And again, you can see, because I have this little edge here, when I shave down, it's going to pop away. And you just slowly work your way all the way around. Now, I don't want to worry about this being very blocky, because all that's going to get carved away, and then eventually I'm going to put all this wood grain texture there. So I'll continue to work our way around the barrel. Again, this is relatively gentle. Not a lot of pressure. Okay. Top row is ready. Now to our bottom band. Again, make that initial score on the edge, and carve our way right to that edge, not past. And we want to start to clean this up. See how blocky that is? So I'm going to be a little more careful now. Cut smaller pieces away. I might even do this, which is almost like sanding it away. And eventually, as you work that, what you should end up with is this. So we have our top piece carved out. Didn't do the bottom because it's going to sit on the base. We have our two bands. It's like this. Well, now we need some planks. A few ways to do this. I want to have some control. So I'm going to use my 90-degree tool here. And create some planks. And this is essentially just like what we did with the base, just like we did with the treasure chest, only now it's round, and we have to worry about not destroying these two metal bands that we spent all this time just carving. So I worked my way all the way around. I'm going to use this tool Make sure I finish up. There we go. And I'm going to use the scribe tool here to put our texture in. And here, just like I did with the other wood planks, you can see the texture goes in different directions. And the more of this texture we have, use the brush, wipe some of this away. So now you really start to see your metal bends, because these are the original smooth, flat Sculpey. And you also have to be sure to continue these bands past that. So the plank goes all the way up to the top. Now in theory, I'm going to do with this last base here. I have the base piece, and I'm going to work the texture in right away, because what I'm going to use is some green stuff to create your metal bands. I usually don't do that, because sometimes green stuff just doesn't want to stick to the Sculpey. So we're going to put our texture in. So it's a little bit easier to carve the texture, because we don't have to worry about ruining the metal bands that we just carved. Again, you may come up with a whole different approach. This is just to kind of throw some ideas at you, just some concepts. So we've got our texture here. And let's try and put a green stuff band over that. So we have our green stuff. This time around, I'm going to mix more yellow than blue. So what that's going to do, and even take some of that blue away, bring back the water, because this mixture is going to stick a little bit better. So I'm mixing this together, and you're going to notice this is going to be a little bit more yellowish than what we used on our chest. Mixing it together real well. And I'm going to bring out our other chest to compare, so you can see how yellow this is versus that. And there's a reason, because we want this to stick. I'll work this out. And I'm going to get my two sculpting tools. Start off with the flat. Again, use the water. And work my way around. I'm just doing this here so you can see. And you might say, wow, that certainly took less time than carving all around it. Well, it did. But as you extend this piece around, sometimes what happens is the green stuff pushes against itself, pushes your band away. So what you can do is do this half, let this set, and then do the other half. I'll try and complete it here. and see if we can avoid pushing away our green stuff. So we're going to try and complete this band. And this, I'm kind of doing this to show you, this is why I don't usually use the green stuff. That's why I carve it away. As you can see, the green stuff, even with extra yellow, doesn't really want to stick. And that's why I recommend, if you're going to do the green stuff band, do a part of it and let it set, and then do the rest. Another thing that can happen too is it ends up being maybe not quite as smooth as this, but it's all up to you, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. And it just puts out a few alternatives. To me, I've always been more comfortable with the carving than trying to get the green stuff to stick to the Sculpey, which is kind of dusty. That's why I mixed more of the green, or more of the yellow, to make it a little bit stickier, but then that makes it softer. So there you've got some barrels and even a few different methods to make those. And now we're going to cover another alternate method on the treasure chests. So we have one more approach for making the chests. And this time, instead of separate pieces, we have one solid piece of Sculpey, which we can carve and then use some of this polystyrene material to finish this off. So first I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to carve the wood planks just like I've done with everything else. So I'm going to take this tool and we're going to make some of those planks. Again, just work our way around by varying the size of the planks. So this is going to be the lid. So let's make sure we have, there we go, somewhat more substantial opening. Now on this top part, it's going to be a little bit tricky, so I'm going to have to hold it in my hand this way, really brace it. There we go. As you can see, the little strips of Sculpey coming out. There we go. Work our way around. Just like we did with everything else, we have to make some wood texture. Work my way around, this time with the scribing tool. Making sure that each plank is a slightly different texture. Sometimes you just have to hold these things towards you, away from you. You can kind of get a feel for that. As soon as you start to move the tool along the Sculpey, it's going to want to push you one way or another. So we'll get our brush. Make sure all these are complete. This thicker Sculpey is going to probably give you a little more resistance than some of these thin pieces. Okay. We have to finish up our two sides. So I'm going to start this off. Cutting the lid. First one, second one. Hopefully you can see this one. There we go. So there's our second one. It's our lid. And for the rest of our planks, if this is a little too round, when you shaped it with your fingers, you can always shave this down and make this a little more square. This was just, it seemed a little bit too round to me. So what I'm going to do is cut this down. There, that's a little better. A little more square. And now back to wood planks. Your work area is going to get a little bit messy, as you can see with curving the Sculpey. Dust will get all over the place. It'll get into your carpet. So that's why I try to have a piece of mat board in my case, but a lot of you will use a cutting board. You just may want to assure to dust all that away the next time you're going to paint or use green stuff on your cutting board. So now, relatively quickly, we have this whole chest carved out. And with these plastic card, what can I do? I can go like this and all the way around. I know that doesn't look very, it's hard to see. There we go. And go that way. And go along the edge here, one way or the other. I could use the thicker card, but you can see this thicker card, it's going to be harder to bend this into place. This, much easier to bend in place. And just for the heck of it, I'm going to put one piece, this plastic card, right along this segment. So here comes the glue again. This is this thicker super glue tends to work better for this kind of a project. The thin, runny glue just doesn't seem to have a whole lot of holding power. So I'm going to hold this down, drag this over, and hold it in place, but not too long, because I don't want to glue my fingers to this. So you can see it wraps all the way around. Pop that off. One band. Can do the other one too. Normally, I would let this other one dry a little more thoroughly so that I don't risk gluing myself to the chest. So you can see I'm going to bend this around. Stop there. Knife. Cut that away. Now the reason I didn't do this method on the barrel, as you can see, the barrel's on an angle here, and this material once I start to work it around, you can see there's going to be a gap. No matter what I try, there's always going to be a little bit of a gap. It's not quite going to land flush. That's why it works okay here. It just doesn't work here. Again, we can put little rivets on this if we want to. We're also going to put right where the lock should go. So again, it's another relatively fast way to get a chest. In this version, you can see that I carved everything away just like we did with the barrel. This was a little more involved, as you can see. This band it's a nice quick way to do it, and it's nice and straight. It's really more what you want to do. So it's time for us to work with our Sculpey and get it ready for baking. I have some items out on the table here. This metal thing right here, it's called a clay extruder. It's really a pasta machine. However, once you use it for Sculpey, it ceases to be a pasta machine because you're not going to want to use this for food. It's either or. It's Sculpey or it's pasta. This device can make sheets of Sculpey. They're about this thickness. This is the widest that you can go. You can go thinner than this. Actually, there's 7 settings on here. This is on setting 7. You can go paper thin if you want. But if you're going to go that thin, you need a stronger type of Sculpey, maybe or Fimo or something like that. This regular white Sculpey that we're using here, this is what is ideal for carving. It's relatively hard once it's baked, but this is the type of Sculpey that you can carve very easily with all those different sculpting tools. And make sure it's the original Sculpey, and make sure it's white. If it's pink, or if it has any kind of color to it, that's either Sculpey 2 or Super Sculpey, and you're going to find that it's much more rubbery, it's much harder, much more brittle, and your tools are going to have a really tough time getting through it. Now this is a really huge box. Right here you can see this is 8 pounds of Sculpey. Typical package I think is 1 pound. Now I got this on Amazon at a really nice price, so I was very happy. Now the Sculpey comes in blocks like this. I think the 1 pound package has 3 of these. And these are wrapped in plastic. You really want to keep these as sealed up as you can, because Sculpey does dry out with time. I can tell even here this is getting a little bit harder. It's been around for several months now, so you want to, necessarily, unless you're going to use a lot of Sculpey, you may just want to use the 1 pound packages instead. So what you need to do is have a few other items too. I've got some ceramic tiles that are the perfect platform for rolling out your Sculpey, for putting on your sheets, and they'll fit in your oven or toaster oven very nicely. Metal trays, I found out the hard way, have a tendency to warp and shift. And again, you're also sacrificing your cookie sheet or pizza pan, whatever it is. Once you've put Sculpey and baked it on it, it's not acceptable for food anymore. So I strongly recommend just finding these at any hardware store, home repair store. I got a few other things here. I've got this. This is a acrylic tube. This was sold in the hobby store in the same section as a Sculpey, but a piece of PVC pipe will do exactly the same thing. Got myself a roller right here. This is very nice for rolling out the thicker sheets of Sculpey and making sure that my thin sheets don't have air bubbles and are nice and flat on our tiles. I also have an X-Acto knife here, and I use that for cutting off my sheets, making sure that they fit on the tile. You can, if you want, kind of pre-cut your sheets. Let's say you want some squares or rectangles. You can do that. It's not the easiest thing in the world because this Sculpey, before it's been baked, it wants to kind of pull and stretch. But a super sharp X-Acto knife can kind of help you with that. Now, to get your Sculpey ready to put in the clay extruder / pasta machine, you have to work it like this. You have to kind of fold it over itself several times. You can see, and watch what happens when I take this and go to work it. See, there's all these splits and cracks. Well, you need to work that Sculpey till all those splits and cracks are gone. And that's what I've done here with this piece. Now I'm going to take some of it off. And there's a couple different ways you can approach this. I'm going to make more of a little tube right here. And I'm going to flatten out parts of it. And not completely. And what this does is it kind of helps get rid of some of the air bubbles that you might find. It presses those out. I've got a kind of a little sheet going on here. Now I have this on setting 7, again the thickest setting. What you're hearing now is a little crank. And I'm going to put the Sculpey in there. I grab the other end. Crank this. I want to keep that crank working relatively quickly because otherwise you're going to get these little stair steps. So I'm going to put this on my sheet, cut off the ends. So now I have some Sculpey that's ready for baking. Once I take my roller and make sure that it's flat. Now if I wanted to maybe make a square out of this, I can always take my triangle and cut away some of the extra Sculpey here. So now I have a much finer edge when I bake it. Sculpey will sometimes shrink a little bit when you bake it. That's something you might want to be aware of when you go to bake things. You can make much wider sheets, as I've done here, by simply squeezing it out into a larger surface. Remember, before we just worked with a tube. Here, squeeze this out into more of a complete sheet. Throw it in the extruder. And you can see now I've got myself a sheet. And if you feel the need, you can cut away some of the edges. Now let's say you want a much thicker sheet. What I advise is actually flattening it out into another sheet, just like we prepared the other one. You can see I've left this much thicker. I haven't smashed it down quite as much. Made myself a little bit of a rectangular border. I'm going to set this down. I'm going to take my roller and I'm going to carefully start to roll out some of the divots that I've created with my thumbprints. You can see I'm flipping this over multiple times. Just like this. And I'm going to continue to do this until I don't see any thumbprints or divots. Notice I'm not just going back and forth like this, because what tends to happen is you smash this side, you smash this side. So I'm going like this, and an X, like this, and an X. Now it is going to be a little bit thinner than when you first started, but still, it's going to be much thicker than what you can get out of here. So here we have, you can see just how much thicker that is than what we can get with the clay extruder. Now once you've got this all set, you have a full sheet for baking. Let's throw some of this out here. Full sheet like this, ready for baking. That's when I bring out a toaster oven and cut it and carve it. And if it can't do this, then maybe you've baked it too long. If it's too spongy, then maybe you haven't baked it long enough. Every oven is different. I found that out too. It took me a while to get used to this toaster oven. It was different than our regular oven. I'm sure every toaster oven is different. So you'll just, I would suggest starting out with just a few sheets of Sculpey and just try that out. Try different settings. You may need to bake it a little longer. You may need to bake it less. So hopefully all of these little instructions here will lead to success in rolling out and baking your Sculpey.
your brain. Fancy dress or in your dark vest. Well, here is the place where you can join the rest.